Okay, the next panel, how think tanks can promote their ideas. I think Daniel and Barbara have the right idea. Become do tanks. So we don't need this panel. They've already given us the solution. But I guess what we'll do now is perhaps discuss some practical ways for that to happen. And to that end, you've got a presentation. I'll let you guys go first. Yeah, because we're yes. No. Okay. So Sebastian, you may.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Yeah, my name's Keith Johnston. We're going to do a little bit of a double act instead of the sort of doing 15 minutes each. We're going to do a little bit of a conversational approach to think tanks and social media. I think I introduced myself yesterday, so I think you know who I am. But Sebastian, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you. So one of the things I do is set up media companies aligned with think tanks. So ones that you might have heard of is CapEx. So we started CapEx in conjunction with Susan Walton, that you might know. She spoke yesterday, a few years ago, and since then we've evolved to the concept, if you like, and moved towards the more traditional media sense. So going along the way, particularly in the UK, and developing mission-led media publications that have the traditional elements that you would sort of anticipate and expect to see. That is the good journalism, the insight, the analysis, but also taking the tools that any campaign or any corporation would adopt to try and identify those audiences and build out a really good group of people that are engaged, and obviously doing this in a way that is targeted and also low cost, which is also a massive consideration, particularly in this field that we all operate in. So that's what I do on a day-to-day basis, and sort of Keith and I and others in the room have sort of worked together on various projects over the past few years. So it's good to be here, and hopefully we can have a chat about things that we do on a day-to-day basis, but also the things that we can sort of work together and work with people in this room to sort of try and get products and services out there that can really sort of spread the reach and also get to the right people.
Thanks, Seb. So I'm probably more of a content man. That was my specialism with my previous job, and Seb, you're probably a little bit of a mixture of that and more technical and understand the technical side. So I want to do a little bit of sort of big picture stuff and just talk about the approach that think tanks should take to social media, and tell us a little bit about what you think about how they should do that.
Sure. So, whether you're a company, whether you sell sort of private jet, vegan burgers, or whether you're trying to sell some ideas, the same theory applies, and that is understand who you're talking to. So I have a very simple formula, and that is EC equals MC. So every company is a media company. In my view, in the age that we're living in, content is king, and there's no way of getting away from that. We need to be able to communicate with people in a way that is easy to understand and in a way that is digestible from 140 characters. So that is certainly something in terms of the high level thing, is just getting into that mentality to say content isn't an afterthought, communication isn't an afterthought, it is actually something that you should be thinking about every step of the way. So that's certainly something that I'd say from a high-level perspective, it's about getting into that frame of mind of saying, okay, this is something interesting. This is an interesting guy I'm interviewing for this report. Okay, how can we turn this into a piece of content that can be used today, tomorrow, and every day after that to try and re-engage the people that already support us and already sort of are bought into what we're doing, but also how can this be an understandable way for new people that are not really there yet, maybe on the spectrum or on the journey to the ideas and thoughts that we all share. How can we use the stories and the people to try and get those people engaged?
So that sounds all very well. That concept itself of the think tank as media company, the think tank as a dedicated, editorially focused, very specifically focused on whatever your think tank. Let's just say, for example, it's free speech or free market, what a think tank should think of itself as a dedicated media company that has a very specific message to get out there in different ways.
Precisely, it's an editorial line in much the same way as any newspaper has a set of issues that it knows that its readers care about. It's about sort of taking that principle and those ways of working that we know that are tried and tested, and applying the think tank's ideas and the things that it cares about to those executions. So it's not about just writing a report every few months. It's about engaging with people every day. There is so much content out there right now. Why not try and break out a 100-page report into 1,000 different tweets? It's trying to win the war by really making things digestible and trying to put human faces and real stories into what we're doing. What was interesting in the session that we just had, was how do we communicate? How do we sort of try and break that barrier? How do think tanks engage with policymakers and so on? And the only way that, in my view, that we've got to do that is making it relevant. Until we can make a policy question really relevant to politicians, or make the politicians' constituents care about the policy question, then there is no way that we're going to get that engagement, because there are so many other things for them to be engaged about.
I really want to stress this point about the media companies. So I think it's, if you could bring up the Reform website, I just want to use a couple of examples of think tanks in the space. So here, you see what I would say is maybe a sort of traditional approach to think tanks, which is they've got a report, they've got, and that's so what's a report? It's a very, very long document that very few people read, and it's incredibly detailed. It's something that takes a lot of time to produce. It's probably quite expensive. There's a lot of planning that goes into it. So you're not going to produce, if you're on a budget, you're not going to produce a lot of these a year. So relying on a report to drive your communications simply means you're not going to have that much to say very often. So I'm not being at all critical of Reform, but I'm just saying that's what you might consider a traditional think tank. We think in terms of producing a report. The corollary of that is that you probably, so I'm generalizing, but my experience of think tanks that produce reports is, let's say that you have a plan for your report. It's cut into 10 stages. And around about stage 9, the report is published. And then stage 10 is the communications part. And then it ends, and then you produce another one. I think, broadly speaking, it would be better to think of that plan as around about stage 5, the report is published, and there are 5 more stages of using that content to get that content out there, so you get a lot more of it. So that's the sort of... Michael, if we could have a look at the CapEx website now. I want to compare Reform to CapEx. So we could talk a little bit about CapEx, because it's a really interesting story. So what happened there is that the Centre for Policy Studies, in fact, Seb, you tell me, because you were involved in it, and I'll get it wrong. What happened there? How did this?
I suppose that it was one of the first properly digital think tanks, in much the same way that it was run out of the Centre for Policy Studies, the Thatcherite think tank in London. And the idea was really to Susan Walton over there was the chairman at the time, and she could probably sort of give more of the historiography than I could. But the idea was to really just change the way that we look at things. To engage not only with the political sphere and the politics that we've discussed this morning, but also trying to really engage on the media side. And that's something that we're really not doing enough as think tanks, to be able to sort of engage on that level. It's one thing to go straight to the politicians, but unless that pressure could be there from the third leg of the stool, and that is the media element, there's not going to be any pressure for the politicians not only to execute, but also to be held to account. And that's certainly something that was the idea in this, that taking the CPS sort of mantra and the ideas of the CPS and trying to convert them into a daily digestible diet of really good, focused news and commentary that in some way obviously told people something that they didn't know, focused on issues that was interesting to sort of a wide spectrum of people, but more than anything else, that would reinforce in a subtle way the values and the ideas of the CPS that it would like to promote over a sustained period of time, beyond just a single report or sort of or one campaign.
Okay. So, Michael, if we can very briefly flip back to reform and then back to CapEx, because I just want to make this point. Here we are. This is the sort of traditional. This is where you can find a reform publications, very prominent, and then you have CapEx, and you're like, well, hold on a minute. This looks like a news website, right? This is like a media website, and that's the point that we're trying to get over. That you will have, or you can think of your think tank as a media company that has a very, very specific message that you can bang on about constantly, depending on how specialized that your topic is, and that you can find ways in the social media environment about talking about your issue in a variety of different ways, which are very cheap. So I want to come on to some of the more practical aspects of how you do that. I'm just going to talk a little bit about aggregation because that's part of my background. So if you're working at a think tank, I'm just going to use the free speech example again. If you're working in a think tank that specializes in free speech and you're in the communications department or any department, it absolutely makes sense for you to be aware of all the debates going on free speech. So what you'll do is something really simple. You'll set up a few Google alerts on free speech. You'll have a look at various websites every day and you'll find lots of articles out there. You can aggregate that content onto your site. You can aggregate that content onto newsletters and repurpose it as your own content. You can do that very, very cheaply. You can add a little bit of commentary on it, or you can rewrite it depending on what your local laws are, and then repurpose that as digital content. Now you're collecting this content anyway. Because if you're doing it, as I say, if you're the press officer, you're collecting that anyway. So there's a very, very cheap way that you can repurpose, aggregate, and curate content and send that out to your audience. Now, if your audience is following you because they're interested in free speech, they're going to be interested in the debate on free speech, whether it's in the Telegraph or whether it's in a German paper or what have you. So there's a really simple way of creating a content platform. And if we can go just down a little bit on the CapEx side. So what you can see is that that's exactly what they're doing. So these articles are some of them are being curated and drawn from other sources and then presented on their site. So there's an article from the Atlantic, for example. But you don't need to go around the web now trying to find this information because they're curating it for you. And it's, as I say, it's not an expensive way of doing it. So Seb, can we talk a little bit more about some of the sort of more practical aspects of that?
Yeah, and also what you just said is sort of completely right. This is not a complicated or a very expensive enterprise. Yes, the initial cost would be maybe a bit more than your average website, but people are building these things into their daily output as you already do, the newsletters or wherever else. It's already there, and I suppose the question that I get asked a lot, especially when we try and sort of take this model and sort of take it to new clients, is that, so why should I do it? There are other people doing this and they're doing it very well, and why should we get involved? Where I suppose something that we've discussed a lot in the past is that actually, well, why not? If you already have this content, all you're doing is reinforcing people's perceptions of what you do. You become more active than you otherwise would do. A lot of think tanks, they've got small teams, limited budgets. But something like this to compile every day would be maybe one short blog post about a topic that's going on in the world, 3 or 4 links, presented in a decent way. All of a sudden, you've got yourself a news website and a publication that you can go out there, and you're showing your funders, you're showing the people that support your campaign or people that will in future, that you're serious. You're serious, you're there with a proper purpose, and you're not sort of just coming out every 6 months with a report. You're constantly evaluating what you do. You're constantly looking for new angles and new ways of engaging with people that aren't really on our plane just yet. So on the practical side of it, I would say that the sort of the 2 primary things that any organization thinking about taking this kind of approach should do is first work out who their audience are, work out what they already have. Do you have a mailing list? Do you have a following on social media outlets, for your Facebook, your Twitters, your LinkedIn? Work out what you already have and work out what is a really easy way, what is the easiest way of you scaling that. So, for instance, to get yourself an increased following on email newsletters or Facebook or Twitter, whatever else. It might be that you change the way that you do events. So instead of just asking people to email you, if you want to RSVP for an event or some sort, it'd be, okay, go to our Facebook page and do it via that. All of a sudden then, by changing the means that people communicate with you, you've then acquired those people for the long term, instead of just having another email in your inbox. So there are small practical things like that that can be done that can then build in the more substantive offering that you can then use to communicate out, such as with a media platform or such as a newsletter or something of that sort. So, that's an interesting dichotomy. But Keith, you've got some good ideas about how this stuff, how this communication, this engagement can turn into a fundraising aspect and maintaining the support of other key stakeholders, not just the engagers.
I mean, what we're seeing now is journalists, sometimes just single journalists, setting up Patreon pages. I don't know if everyone's familiar with Patreon, but it's actually an incredibly effective way to allow people to give to something that they feel strongly about. So it's not an expensive platform at all. It's a platform that's available to anyone with a PayPal account. And it's becoming a new way of funding media and journalism. So magazines like Quillette, for example, are almost entirely funded now by Patreon. And also, if there are people out there that feel strongly about your issue, giving them the opportunity to give in an easy way is an obvious fundraising source. The other thing is, if you currently have a blog, then transforming that blog into a magazine, elevating yourself from being the writer to the editor, is a much more effective way of garnering interest, and you can create a platform which will attract advertising and sponsorship. So a few of the advantages of that is, if you're writing your own blog, great, that's your own blog. But if I now suddenly invite Seb to write on my blog, it's also highly likely that Seb's going to tweet that out and send that out to his own social network. So I'm now using other people's contacts to get it out there. And these websites, they're not expensive to set up. The templates are out there. So it's not an expensive sort of exercise. You can also, if you produce very high quality content, you can start charging for that in terms of your subscribers. I know you've got some experience of that as well, Seb. So what and it's not easy. So let's not trick people into thinking
it's not easy. But when it works, it really works, and it can really sort of turn something small that was designed to have a niche audience into something that can really scale up and be self-sustaining, which is what we all want at the end of the day, is that we have a platform that can engage people, but it can also cover its own costs. The key, I think, as Keith mentioned, to getting that level of sustainability is really building the audience first. So if you think about the conversion rates that we've done this sort of about 5 or 6 times now in terms of trying to convert your general email newsletter or people that engage with you, that you're looking probably about 7 to 11% of people converting then and donating or subscribing some money. So think of that in terms of scale. You're looking in terms of being able to sustain something like this, a couple of £1,000 sterling per month. So you really do need to scale up and get at least a few thousand, tens of thousands of people engaged in some way and really sort of constantly engage with you. That's the key. It is not just one email, or one message, or one Facebook post a week. It is a constant series of communication. It's also listening to your audience. We're living in an age where we can basically analyze everything and anything. Any one of these websites that you're registered to, possible to dive into your individual profile, understand what you read, understand how you engage, understand how you like and comment and open, and all sorts. It is then about just making sure that your experience is the one that you want to get. It's no point us sitting here and saying, this is a great story, this is a fantastic thing, and this shows why free market is an important and valuable addition to society. However, to the average punter, that might not be what they want to hear. They might want to know how that relates to Uber, or how that relates to the new sort of social crisis or housing or something of that sort. So it's about understanding what works. It's about doing more of what works for that individual, doing different things based on the analytics that you have, and then building from that to sustainability, and at some point realizing that content costs and that you can charge for that content.
Good. I also want to just give a shout out to a particular platform, which is the podcast platform, because I think it's an incredibly cheap platform. It's incredibly easy to get to place that on existing online platforms which are searchable way beyond your existing base, and the costs of doing that are very small. So could you just give us very quickly what might be the average cost of producing of getting podcast equipment and then producing your first podcast?
Yeah, well, I mean, the key things, particularly with podcasting and video, is not to let perfect be the enemy of the good. So there's a lot that you can do with just a standard iPhone. Quiet room helps. A quiet room, a small table, and an intimate setting. Putting that together and just getting it out there. You won't know what works, and you won't know what people like until you have that out there. And publish it. You've got nothing to lose. As long as you stay within the sort of parameters of good taste, you're fine. And just get it out there. And you can build then, once you have a sort of a good use study, you know what people like, you know what works, then invest a couple of £100 in better equipment and maybe
it's 250 quid for
exactly.
for a good quality microphone.
But just start it small and build up, I think would be the sort of primary advice. And just, why wait? Just do it.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
No, I wanted to ask about the notion of subscription or trying to. I mean, I understand the desire or the need to raise revenues to keep your operation going, but aren't you driving away sort of a casual visitor to your website, or you're putting up a financial barrier to?
Okay, I got it.
Yes and no. You will alienate some people. There are ways of doing it. You can meter the provision that you give for free, and then sort of maybe after 3 or 4 articles, Harvard Business Review is the best example of this. You would then sort of charge at a certain point down the line. But there are loads of different options for that, and what you do to get them in the door is sort of
I want people to have as much of my information as possible. I don't want to put up a financial barrier to them getting my information.
Okay, fine. So we'll move on, and Octavian, go next. Got 10 minutes, 11 minutes.
I have to make a confession from the outset. I hope the auditorium is in favor of the free movement of people. I would like to move.
Yeah, good. I do as well. I exceed.
I'm a football fan, and if you give me also a ball, I would be in my environment.
Use it if you like. I don't have to.
I have also a very brief presentation somewhere in this laptop. No. The story I had in mind to share with you is more or less linked with the previous presentation, which was very practical, very accurate. I paid a lot of attention to it. I'm much less a practical mind. I'm more a man of ideas, and ideas tend to die before they see the light of the day, if not properly, practically prepared.
There's a take the control.
So I want to share my experience as a both scholar and journalist. I always had the impression that academia and mass media go together like the great economist and philosopher, American economist and philosopher Frank Sinatra said, go together like a horse and carriage, like love and marriage and so on and so forth. I was born simultaneously scholar and a journalist. I've activated for 15 years in the mainstream media in Romania. And in a certain moment, I got sick. I got sick because of the subject of this presentation. I will progressively reveal my reason for sickness. My presentation evolves around a very tough word, a word that is so tough that is closer to God. This tough it is. And the word is truth. The title of this presentation is Truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. This is a synonym to God. Decent people have to have decent aims. Getting closer to the truth is a fair job. Never aim to this completeness because it's beyond our reach. The environment for getting closer to the truth is the market for ideas. I'm an economist. I love ideas, and between markets and hierarchies, or states or governments, I love markets. So I love the markets for ideas more than I love the government of ideas. That's where I felt in love when first hearing this syntagm, which is not mine. It was well prepared by great forerunners, and I just wanted to establish it in the form of a media outlet, some kind of media outlet that, in my view, I want to be as far as possible resemblant to mass mainstream media from which I've defected. The markets for ideas and the quest for verity, not variety. The quest for verity has, in my view, as both a scholar and a journalist, three filters. The one is the filter that science provides to us, scientific pertinence. The second filter for truth, with or without quotation marks, is economic profit. And the third one is political power. I, both as a scholar and as a journalist, I've lived at the intersection of these environments, science, business, and politics. I have to accommodate my own belief and convictions as a scientist with the business loyalties of some of my colleagues from the magazine I've managed, and with the political loyalties of others. And it's quite a job to do this and try to survive mentally. I speak of media that is economics and business, which nevertheless gets to be political and gets to draw attention, and you, on your turn, get to tend to be more attentive to what happens with you, up to a point in which everything seems to miss your ability to judge. So I want to share with you some thoughts. I will be unsystematic. I'm not honoring my profession as a scholar. I'm not going to say very tremendously shocking things that journalists should supposed to share. So I will say something that could be fitted in the genre of romance. The market for ideas, the concept with which I felt in love, is the landmark of this quest for getting closer to the truth, both in academia, business environment, politics, and mass media, which lies at the intersection of all. Long story short, the markets for ideas between bazaars and agoras. Few writings. I like to share with you some lecture that influenced my thinking in this respect. I'm definitely sure that most of us know about them, and I will add nothing to your knowledge, but nevertheless, I'll try to surprise you. I will spare some words about truth-seeking and truth Sickening, by the way, my experience in this universe of mainstream media, and a case study about who presses the press nowadays, who adds pressure, who puts pressure on the press, or who should do it. First and foremost, I have a word. It's not necessarily mine. In Romania, we have a word that every person should leave something behind in his life, either a home, a family, a tree, a mortgage. I'll try to leave behind myself a definition, which is great in my environment as an academic. And the definition of the market for ideas, which is the space for thoughtful people, because we are all here members of think tanks of different scope and scale. We are thoughtful people. And the market for ideas is about human minds striving to change and exchange creatively destroyed thoughts, free from barriers and burdens. This is my image on the markets for ideas. Proper markets of ideas, both in academia or in mass media. The marketplace for ideas is caught somewhere between two realms. The bazaars that are governed by the law of demand and supply and by pricing mechanisms, and agora, governed by democratic rule of law, or, if we do not have that chance, by despotic rule of man. They are great forerunners who studied from the economic point of view the phenomenon of the market for ideas, although the market for ideas might seem as an oxymoron for an economist, because economics is the science of governing scarcity. I've had yesterday an insight in this. Ideas, by their nature, have very little things to do with scarcity. They could be abundantly generated. You need to have the mind, the mental infrastructure to just generate ideas, but once generated, the ideas can freely flow. So scarcity is of no avail to add into this picture, so economists have a less thing to be worried about. Nevertheless, the markets for ideas have some good economic insights that could be added to them when analyzing and preaching them and professing them properly. The few writings which shaped my mind, there are millions of good pieces written in this respect. I've only chosen 8 because my name is Octavian, and Octavian in Latin is the 8th. The 8th in I don't know what, but something related to 8th. So 8 lectures that could be inspiring for those who want to dig in the markets for ideas and extract something valuable out of them and share in elegant media outlets, as the one I try to establish and has, coincidentally or not, the same name, The Market for Ideas, in its version, online version, themarketforideas.com. I play with words. I'm not necessarily confident that my metaphors are properly associated with the ideas of the authors I've quoted, but more or less they match up to a certain point. First of all, the map monde of ideas, famously 3 worlds of Karl Popper. Karl Popper mapped the universe in 3 realms. The first one is physical, bodily things. The second one is the products of human mind. And the third one, the established products of human mind, those products that outlive their issuers. The markets for ideas lay between the second and the third world, lay between the emergence of thoughts and the
1 minute.
established the establishment of these thoughts in the form of scientific theorems or artistic products. Michael Polanyi, Michael, not Carl. Carl is from the other side, from the other part of the world. It's a socialist and the classical liberal brothers. The same, I think, is with Menger brothers in the 19th century. Hayek, everybody knows about Hayek. Deirdre McCloskey, excellent trilogy, The Bourgeois Era. Ronald Coase, the famous economist, who analyzed very thoroughly in a small article what is common and what is different between the markets for goods and the markets for ideas, and where the government and markets should stay in this picture. Michael J. Sandel, an interesting American moralist. Titu Maiorescu, a Romanian, who speaks about the mimesis of institutions. And some obsession of my colleagues, the metrics of ideas, which are of great fashion in modern academia and exhaust our lives as professors and researchers. Thank you. I will pleasantly expand on any topic related to my experience, which I've never, I didn't have a chance to confess completely, but the secrecy has its own role in life. Yeah. I will be glad to talk during the discussion questions after what I've missed in my presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, Paata. Going to wait for you. Good.
Hello. My name is Paata Sheshelidze. I'm president of New Economic School, Georgia. And my task now is to inform you how our school promoted ideas of liberty in Georgia. So first of all, shortly about our organization. It was founded in 2001, and since that time we are working in many directions in trying to disseminate economic knowledge and ideas of liberty. We have strong philosophical background, so we are never hiding it. We are openly saying that we are market-oriented organization, and mostly we are operating as an educational institution, although we are registered as a union, like think tank. But we are just mostly focusing on education. So what practically we do? We are organizing a lot of public events, seminars, trainings, conferences, lectures, debates, and it's very during the week, like 3-4 times. For instance, it was yesterday, it will be Monday, Tuesday, 2 in Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, so almost every day something is happening. So we did more than 600 events of different formats during those years, and more than 40,000 people attended those events organized by our organization. We are also doing some research, especially I would like to underline economic freedom of the world research and some other researches related to this. Also, we started municipality index in Georgia. Also, we did several researches about monetary and fiscal policy of former Soviet countries, communist countries, and also we researched attitude toward the business in Georgia, and so many, some other also. We do some consultations within needed for politicians, parties, businesses, NGOs, and it's quite demanded. Of course, we are trying to bring foreign good experience of reforms in Georgia. We invited Georgia many worldwide well-known economic reformers like Martlar, Ruth Richardson from New Zealand, Martlar is from Estonia, and many others. Some of you who were also here, Chris, Dan, Barbara, Krasen is very often coming now. It's also heading many others. We organized a lot of international activity, including bigger ones like 200, 300 participants. Especially, I would like to underline several ones. One of the first big event was organized in 2005 with participation in Krasen and Sasha Tam, maybe you know him also from Naumann Foundation. It was a regional event about economic freedom, and then we organized huge event in 2006 with participation of a lot of experts and leaders in order to support Georgian economic transformation. And it was very good time. And also, it was European Resource Bank meeting in Georgia in 2008, just after the war with Russia. It was very, very important event for us because 100 people came and supported us morally and physically. It was very nice, and we handled this event. Then later, we also hosted Economic Freedom Network meeting in Georgia. So, and many others, of course. I cannot list them, all of them. Of course, we are trying to disseminate our knowledge, economic knowledge, but also we are trying to disseminate particular ways how to reform and what to do reform. So policy initiatives and advocacy is also our job. For instance, tax reforms, monetary reforms, and other different issues. We are always discussing in Georgia. Right now, by the way, we are focusing more and more about education. Right now, we are doing teachers program. We are teaching teachers from the school how to teach economics, and also we are preparing book for schools in economics. So it will be very soon, and we will continue the teaching teachers in order to spread our ideas already from the school time, not only on university level, but already in school. So it will be, and it's easy, relatively easy, because in Georgia, educational system is quite flexible, allows different variety of books in the school. So if we will have a book, it will easy to introduce in the school. So it's very much it's our job. So I think I'm very optimistic in this direction. Of course, we are very active with media. We have almost daily based coverage. I'm getting 2-3 interviews per day, radio, TV, electronic press, so I'm even here. I gave several interviews by telephone and other media sources. So quite well known. Our group is quite well known, quoted, and clearly recognizable. Also, we are active in Facebook. We have more than 5,500 followers, and the number is growing. We are disseminating a lot of information via Facebook and trying to invite people, trying to inform people, try to share links of our friends, other institutional possibilities, and so on and so on. Of course, we are networking a lot. Like we are here, we are member of Atlas Network, we are member of different other groups like Economic Freedom Network and so on, and we are open for everyone. And during those years, more than 200 different foreign lecturers visited us as a lecturer. So Chris was many times, now he's coming again. Krasen was there, Dan was here, then Barbara was there. So I'm just listing those who are here, plus more others. And we are all very open. We organizing, for instance, summer school several times, like winter schools, and we will be very happy to cooperate and invite you to come to Georgia, because it's very important, because our priority is to educate the Georgian population. So we like that you are coming in Georgia and helping us and to do so. Also, we do publications. We published already 20 books. Those books are books of Mises, Hayek, Leone, and Bastia, and many others. Also, plus we published a selection of articles, so 8 volumes. And I hope we will continue those series. And also, time to time, we do some video and audio clips to disseminate information. We ask students to make them and also disseminating them. And once we did promotional posters, like we wanted to promote business entrepreneurship, so we printed the posters and published it in the streets, like bus stations, like the poster for the bus station. So we were trying to promote ideas of business. It's an entrepreneurship, spirit of entrepreneurship. What we are not doing basically is and compromises. We are not political organization. We don't need to compromise. So we are saying what we really think and doing that. Also, we are not lobbying. We are not writing any particular piece of legislation or something or amendment and not lobbying particular stuff. But we are discussing pluses and minuses of other people's initiatives, but we are not lobbying, so we are not trying to influence particular decision. To be honest, I don't believe any political decisions, that's why I'm not lobbying anything, so I'm only lobbying to decentralize and eliminate. So it's one of the reasons. And also, we are not partisan, we are not linked with any political group. We are open for everyone, although we have like some priorities because of our philosophical standpoint. We are not cooperating with extreme like nationalist and pro-Russian oriented groups, but others. We are trying to involve in our work, inviting the people for our seminars, trying to give advices, give ideas, meeting them. So, but not politically connected. In terms of not partisan. No, we are not siding for any of them. Right now, which is well, I can say talk a lot about different our plans, but there's one plan which I would like to share because you might help. Because at least you can advise. One of our priority right now is to establish free market-based master and PhD program, and we have Georgian partners already. This University of Georgia, which is quite supportive, and we have a joint program with them. We have a library in this university and using their facilities for our seminars and trainings. They are very friendly, and the leadership of this university is quite free market oriented, and we together are dreaming to establish master and PhD program based on free market concept like curriculum, and we are looking for the partner university, and if you will be helpful in this, I will appreciate. So this is website of this university. You can check. It's private university, largest university. It's international university. They have foreign students, a lot of Nigerians, Arab countries, Indians. They have like 1/3 of foreigners inside, so they have like double language, Georgian English education, so quite good. And centrally located in Tbilisi is very good for communication. So this our one of the plans. So if you have any idea of cooperation, it will be very nice to do this together. Of course, I'm open for your communication, any new ideas, and so on. And I would like to note here as a as a conclusion that all this work will be not possible without support of Naumann Foundation, which is strongest our ally. And the Naumann Foundation does great work everywhere, but especially in our region, it was very instrumental. And most of those activities which I listed was done by support of Naumann Foundation. And the personalities, those who are representing Naumann Foundation in Georgia, like first Dr. Yon and now Mr. Bohman, are absolutely supportive and friendly, and they understand everything in like half word, if I'm correct. When I'm starting, they already understand what I need. So we have very smooth and really challenging relationship. And finally, I would like to say, if you ask me, okay, you did something, but what is the result? So I will tell you one single number. Georgia is number 8 in economic freedom of the world index. And this was development of last 16 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll give you a few more minutes if you want to carry out you've got something else to say, and then we'll take questions.
I suppose the only thing I'd like to just come back to your point quickly, just cut short on that a little bit. You were asking, if I'm right, why would you limit people at all from sort of accessing all the content that you might have? I think the primary reason that would be the case, put the financial aspect to one side for a moment, but if propagating your content on sort of Facebook and Twitter and all sorts of those kind of platforms doesn't work anymore in the same way as it did 6 months ago, not to mention how it was working 6 years ago. You look at platforms, organizations that have spent a huge amount of money building a following on these platforms. What they've been realizing, particularly in terms of news and policy papers or anything that is vaguely political or set out by an organization, because of the preferential algorithm treatment now given in the past 6 months to personal posts, we've seen a huge decline in organic, non-paid engagement from these platforms. So what you're seeing is a real significant drop on news platforms and also policy institutions as well. So the reason that we need to really move these, we can sort of show different examples later. The primary issue is if you're going to put your content out there, be it paid or just registration, registration curtain instead of a paywall perhaps, what that does is it moves the individual that you will have to now pay more often than not to engage on these platforms. It moves them off those platforms that will cost to re-engage onto your own platform that you can communicate in your own way. So that is why more than ever before, these platforms are fantastic at targeting the people, but the primary objective should be getting them off those platforms onto a platform that you could control. But we can chat about it later, and I can certainly show you some examples of.
Okay, we're getting into your lunchtime, but we still have time for some questions. Yes, sir. Microphone's coming. Thank you. Identify yourself in case.
I'm Anders Sydstedt from Sweden, Svensk Tidskrift. Actually, I want to talk, perhaps tell a story about how we did a little bit compared to CapEx.
Okay.
We had a think tank before, but we actually moved our efforts to a magazine instead. So instead we are taking a magazine and trying to transform that into a think tank. So we already have a crowd of readers, and then we can get special stories, and we can lift up, and we also can crowdsource not money, but ideas through the magazine. So we
Is
say,
it a
let's
virtual
we have
magazine or a physical magazine?
Excuse me?
Is it a virtual magazine or physical?
Yeah. It's
online.
Online every Friday. We have a newsletter and a website, and we have. But we also make a yearly book with the 20 most read articles every year, and so on. We have a seminar presenting all the writers, the top writers, and so on. And then but then we also do, instead of reports, we sometimes have a special. We take a special topic that we want to raise attention to, and then we say, here is a topic that we really want a discussion about. And then we have our first article produced by ourselves and our friends, but then we also invite our peoples to write about this topic.
Okay.
And then we sort of crowdsource smart people. And then we have a discussion in our magazine, and then we print a book with these and have an event, and then the debate and the discussion continues. So we have before, instead of the normal business logic of a think tank to first source people to make a report and then hope to get attention of a report, we get attention before we present it. So we get like this.
Good.
Thanks.
Next question or comment, observation?
Maybe I'll just say something on that. I mean, I think that's absolutely fantastic what you're doing. I'd also say that the funding for investigative journalism in what you might call mainstream media has collapsed. So they're just not doing it. So if you look at the idea of doing a report as more of, it's like deep investigative journalism and presenting it like that, it becomes, you're sort of moving the way it's being seen, and it's so much more interesting presenting it in that way. So I think what you're doing is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. That may be a good thing. In many ways, journalists are our enemy in the sense that they don't have this background. They're antagonistic to it as a general rule.
Yeah.
Journalists, one of my big criticisms is that journalists only study journalism. They don't study history. They study the history of journalism. So they don't, and they're activists, so they come into, so our solutions are not their solutions. So even if you explain to them very clearly, the well is poisoned. It's a difficult.
Yeah, and in many cases, at most, they're getting paid 5 pence a word. So they've got to churn out that copy. So they're not going to be taking their time over this stuff. Like like you guys can afford to do the in-depth stuff. They just can't afford to do that.
So something based on my more or less experience in the mainstream and non-mainstream media, for me it's of greatest importance, of utmost importance, that ideas should be cross-breed. I'm not very much in love with libertarian magazines. The Market for Ideas, the magazine which I established, which is a little bit more than a magazine, tries to get to the same table decent people from decent ideological backgrounds, making them able, at least as we can do in some thousand science characters. You need a life to change the ideas of a man, not necessarily 10 minutes in which he reads an article. But we do not want to establish islands of thought. I as a libertarian have no passion in discussing only with my peers and pairs of same-minded people. There's no use. We risk to remain insulated from the community. We risk to remain insulated in our communities, which the liberal side, in the classical European sense, are very hard to aggregate, and I see it from my experience back home in Romania. We have some think tanks, some with great tradition, but they are not put in a substantive manner together, only by scarce events, free market roadshows, and some meteoric appearances, which does not do much justice to the libertarian, classical liberal movement. We want these ideas to be put where bad ideas are in place. Try to make them wonder of their own sanity. I'm not saying necessarily that we publish in our magazine insane people, ideologically insane people, but we are not Puritans. I like to publish an article which draws reactions, thoughtful reactions. And this is the big gain. Two peoples from two universes get together in the Market for Ideas, not in their living room back home with their mirrors in front of their eyes.
Okay. We clawed back our time from the last session, but Daniel, something? Did you raise your finger? Okay. This will be the last one. Got it.
Just one very quick thing, and that goes in the direction of what you gentlemen have said. It's the translation part. And also goes Octavian's direction. We are very often very bad in translating our message. And it's especially something I realized with economic think tanks. They are brilliant in their analysis, but they're horrible in the translation part. And if I try to talk with the average Joe about the topics that we have at hand, they look at me like, what the hell are you talking about? And that is something we realize more and more, and something we more and more try to change. And one of the ways we try to change it is giving a general topic and let people from the peers translate the subject for them. How do we do that? We have, for instance, now in Romania, a new anti-corruption website where we have, of course, teaching materials, where we have for teachers, for high school students. And we have anti-corruption map and so on and so forth. But we thought, okay, this is very dry. How can we translate that topic? And we started a video contest. And we have 1.5 million contacts with that video contest. The videos that were uploaded have 45,000 votes. They were disseminated through the entire country. It's growing and growing. And that's something where we also get additional funding. Vice as a media partner. We have two radio stations. We have a wine company that's sponsoring us. Embassies that are sponsoring us. We're currently touring the country with that and go to high schools and show them those movies. And the winner of last year's contest is a school. So we're focusing this year on youngsters. So we try to get them while they're young. But my main message is we need to be better in translating the subjects that we have at hand. Otherwise, we sit together in a nice fora like this, discuss those topics, and yeah, we're absolutely right. Why is nobody listening to us? Well, because we're speaking the wrong language. And changing the language is something I would like to encourage us to do.
Thank you. Okay, well, that wraps up our panel. Thank you for your attention. Your lunch, I think, is ready. Sure. Thanks for the speakers.